Gemara that we learned yesterday, we had a what you would call an Agadah Gemara, a Gemara that had a lot of homiletic, you know, inside stories about Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Hillel, Hazake, and the Gemara was the story of the Gemara was about Rabbi Eliezer, where he went to be spending Shabbos in Galil HaElyon, or possibly it was the Shabbos of Sukkot, and they asked him 30 questions in Hilchos Sukkah. So it sounds like it must have been near Sukkot. So they asked him 30 questions about the laws of Sukkah, and he answered some of them and not the others. Either 12 he answered and 18 he didn't answer, or 18 he answered and 12 he didn't answer. A different opinion, but basically he didn't tell them all the answers. And what he told them was, these I heard, and these I didn't hear. He didn't say, I don't know these I know, these I know. He said, these I heard, and these I never heard. So the people asked him, they said, we don't care if you heard the answer or you didn't hear the answer. We want to know what you say, what to do. So he said, you're causing me to reveal my policies. And I have things that I've learned from my Rebbe. And one of them is that I don't say things that I didn't hear clearly from my Rebbe. And there's another way of reading it. His kaktuni, are you going to cause me to say something, like in a question? Are you going to cause me to say something that I never heard from my Rebbe? So there are two ways of reading the Gemara, but basically he doesn't say things if he didn't hear them from his Rebbe. And we mentioned yesterday that it's not so simple to understand that on a very literal sense, because seemingly both Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said things that they didn't necessarily. They said things especially Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he made many takonos, decrees that were not heard. They were not established by his Rebbe, by his teachers, and yet he still made them. He established them. And even Rabbi Eliezer, a famous story of this Tanur Shel Achnai, where Rabbi Eliezer gave a psak din about this oven, a certain type of oven, if it's tahor, that it's pure, and seemingly he didn't he didn't have that teaching from his Rebbe, and yet he gave a psak. So there's room for a question about how to translate this. Can you translate it on the literal sense? And yesterday I mentioned that one of the commentaries says that he until his Rebbe passed away, he never would say anything that he didn't hear. But once his Rebbe passed away, it was all about honoring his Rebbe. So once his Rebbe passed away, then it was okay to say things that he didn't hear from his Rebbe. So those are that's one of the answers. They do talk about this. It's a topic of discussion of how to differentiate. But the bottom line is that Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, they would never say things that they didn't hear from their Rebbe. And according to the Sfas Emes, that only applied when their Rebbe was still alive. Which is similar to a rule. There's a rule that you're not supposed to paskin in the city of your Rebbe, right? So it's similar to that idea that, let's say you go to a town, that's where your Rebbe is, he's the main rabbi, and someone says, am I allowed to do this? Are you know, what's the halacha here? And so the appropriate thing is you sort of like You give the honor to the local rabbi, and rather than answering shilas and opening up shop in his town, you especially if you're the student, you know you give the honor and don't just go and start the answering shilas. Yes, Mordechai.
Isn't there that thing where Shmuel, when he was young, passing something, and
Yeah,
he was and it caused the problem with Elway?
yeah. That was a serious thing over there. Mordechai is bringing up the story with Eli HaKohen. Shmuel was a child, and his mother Hannah had brought him to the Mishkan to stay there with Eli, and they were going to bring a carbon. And Eli wanted to, and then they wanted a kohen to bring the. Eli would always get a kohen to do the shchita, to slaughter the karbanis. And Shmuel, the little child, I don't know, he's 2 years old or whatever, he said, "You don't need a kohen to shacht. You need a kohen to do the other avodas. The kohen, you don't need a kohen to shacht. Even a Yisrael could shacht." And Eli was very insulted, so to speak. Felt that this is a child. He's um, uh, being disrespectful, and so yeah, it's a whole story how Eli was going to curse him, and his mother begged Eli not to curse him. And imagine she waited years and years to have this child. And Eli said, "No, you'll have another child. I'll bless you. You'll have another child." And she said, "No, no, this child, this is the one." And so, sure enough, um, he let him live, and he became the famous Shmuel Hanavi. Okay, so anyway, bottom line is that this is a similar idea, at least according to the Sfas Emes, that's the concept here, that um, he didn't paskin when his Rebbe was alive. He didn't want to say things unless he heard them from his Rebbe. Uh, and then he says a number of other matters that are connected to this. In other words, he mentions that I was always the earliest in the study hall. I stayed the latest. And what he's explaining is that don't think that I'm probably not going to be able to answer your shilas because I don't say anything that my Rebbe's never said. Uh, I know everything that my Rebbeim said. So any shilah that came up in the last 50 years, I have. Oh, you think I might have missed that day? I didn't miss any days. I was there. You think they might have had these shilas when I came late? I never came late. Maybe after I left some shilas. No, every shilah, almost every shilah, 99.9% of the shilas I am aware of, maybe 100%. So that's his claim to the fact that although he's only going to answer shilas that he's heard, but he does have a very substantial amount of answers that you could still ask. It's worth asking. Yes, Victor.
So does this mean that they're depending on different places or different times? The obviously it sounds like the questions change over the years. In other words, new questions are coming up, right? Because if he never heard these things discussed, either it was one thing that that generation they didn't have to ask because they already knew the halacha, or the new generations we were losing more and more, so we had to ask more and more. And I'm just curious how this developed that it never came up.
So the there is such a understanding that when it comes to applying the halacha that he heard, that he was able to do, maybe to apply it, but there is such a thought. I'd have to look at the specific answers, what the different mafarshim say. I mentioned to you the Sfas Emes, but there are some later commentaries, like I know there's they bring down from other commentaries, some other. In fact, I could probably pull it up 1 second. Let me see. Let's see. Here's one. Chavis Yair. Rabbi Eliezer talked about halachas with his teachers. He discussed halachas with his teachers and colleagues, and he offered his own teachings. But when it came to a halachic ruling, he would only say as his Rebbe taught, or if his Rebbe agreed with him. The case of the oven that he gave a psak, that he spoke about, he really was not giving a psak din. He was just arguing with the rabbis because he disagreed with their logic. So this is his this is the Chavis Yair's understanding. The problem with that explanation, the question on it, is that the Tanur of Achnai, that oven that he talked about, it does say that the rabbis brought all the ovens that Rabbi Eliezer ruled are tahar, and they destroyed them in protest. It really implies like he issued practical halachic rulings. The Chavis Yair is not understanding it that way. He understands that he wanted to declare them tahar, but he never really gave the psak. So the way the Chavis Yair is explaining it is, in learning, he would talk about that. That's one point that the Chavis Yair is adding here, that he would discuss learning with them, no problem. But when it came to the practical application of halacha, he only said things as his Rebbe taught him. That's one. Now comes another explanation from Reb Chaim Shmuel Levitz. Rabbi Eliezer would say halachis that he didn't hear from his teacher, but only if he was confident that his teacher would come to the same conclusion. So the case of So that's the way he understands it, that if he was confident that they would come to the same conclusion, then he would say things. So that's it adds a little more cases where he would paskin according to that explanation. But there is, I think I once heard from Rabbi Soloveitchik that he learned that the way he understood this is that that when it came to practical application of the halachas, he would. I think I heard a shir that they repeated from Rabbi Soloveitchik such a thing, that he would. There's a difference between just practical application of the halacha or the actual halachas. Okay, so the next story was about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, which basically are very similar things. He says that he never would speak a sichas chulin. That's never would speak. Literally, it means mundane talk, but the Rashi seems to understand it that it's divrei havoy. He never spoke words of schoik, frivolous talk. Seemingly, the problem with seemingly what Rashi, the reason Rashi is translating that, I think, is why doesn't Rashi just learn that he never spoke mundane talk? I think Rashi is bothered with the fact that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai did business. He lived 120 years. The first 40 years he was in business. If he was in business, he must have been involved in mundane talk. So if he's saying he never did any sichas chulin, it must mean not just mundane, it must mean frivolous. So maybe that's the way Rashi's learning. If you learn that there is a way of learning this Gemara that he doesn't mean miyamav from in his whole life. It means from when he started learning Torah. And if you learn it that way, then maybe you could translate it that once he started learning Torah, he wouldn't talk sichas chulin. That even though, of course, sichas chulin is strichan limud, even though it's important to talk, to learn from the mundane talk of the great rabbis. But nevertheless, maybe he was machmir and he tried never even to have that type of, extra, didn't discuss things that weren't applicable to Torah and halacha. Anyway, Rashi learns that it means he never spoke frivolously. Now, he also never went 4 amos without Torah, without tefillin. No one ever came earlier than him to the Beis Medrash. He never slept in the Beis Medrash. The truth is, I skipped out with Rabbi Eliezer the same thing, that he said that he never slept in the Beis Medrash, not a permanent sleep, not even a temporary sleep. And he also said that Lo sachti sichas chulin, I never spoke sichas chulin. So that's basically the same things. But by Rabbi Yochanan, it adds a few points. Well, number one, he never slept. No, he never was never maharher. He never slept in the Beis Medrash. Okay, that was the same. But he was never maharher, never thought divrei Torah in the dirty roads, in the dirty alleys. You can imagine in the olden days, some of the alleys, they didn't have the garbage trucks like we have today. And certain places were just like dumps and pretty disgusting and smelly. And even though Rabbi Yochanan himself, we've mentioned, Rabbi Yochanan himself held that you're allowed to cover your mouth and speak divrei Torah even in such places. That's not the halacha, but he held that way. Nevertheless, he himself was machmir, and he didn't do that. He would not even think of Torah in these mekaymes metunafis. And some say that this paragraph is emphasizing is the greatness of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, that he was able to take from his mind, even though his mind was engrossed in Torah, but when it came to a place where you're not supposed to learn, he was able to quickly change it, even though most people wouldn't be able to do that, just push it away from your mind. He was able to do that. So that's another pshat, another way of explaining this Gemara, that he was so great and so involved in Torah, and yet he was able to push away the Torah when he wasn't supposed to learn it. He was able to clear his mind. He was able to clear his mind from the Torah thoughts immediately at the when he needed to. Now he also never left anyone in the Beis Medrash, and no one ever found him sitting and doing nothing. On Daimim, he was always sitting and learning, and but the thing is, it said that already. He didn't go Dalet Amos without Torah. So what does it mean? He didn't. You never saw him Daimim doing nothing. It means you never saw him even thinking in Torah, because he was always saying words of Torah. And then no one didn't let anyone else open the doors for his students. He himself would open the doors. We mentioned that had to do with jealousy. He didn't want the Talmidim to be jealous, and Bittul Torah, that it would cause less Torah study. So people would say who's going to open the door for this one. It would be more of a jealousy type of matter. People opening the door for other students. Especially sometimes people get insulted, and so Rabbi Yochanan himself would just hold the door open. And also it says that he never he never would say something he didn't hear from his Rebbe. He never said when it's time to leave the Beis Medrash, except on Erev Pesach and Erev Yom Kippur. And Erev Pesach, we spoke about that it's a mitzvah to bring the Karban Pesach. It's also, you got to put the kids to sleep. And there is a pshat also that it's to bake matzahs. In the olden days, we have matzahs being baked from, they're already starting on, after Simchas Torah, they open the matzah bakeries. But in the olden days, when did they bake the matzahs for Pesach? And maybe Sephardic people, I'm told, do it now as well. On the day of, you bake matzah. Even throughout Pesach, they're baking matzahs. And is that true? By Sephardim, they bake the matzah on Pesach?
I know the Yemenites, they make the matzah like Erev Pesach. And I know also the Boston Rebbe here has Erev Pesach matzah making.
So Erev Erev Pesach is a big minhag. Even the Lubavitcher Rebbe used to, it's a very special time to bake the matzah on Erev Pesach. It's a special inyan to bake it Erev Pesach. But I'm told that Sephardic people they bake the matzah in their own ovens. It's not like they use a special matzah bakery, and throughout Pesach they're even baking matzah. Is that true?
The only ones that still do that are maybe the Yemenites. I haven't heard recently, but we also have the soft matzah too. That's another.
Right, it's soft.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. I think it's if the people, if you don't do it right, it's too dangerous nowadays. People don't want to take a chance.
So do you use soft matzahs for your seder?
Yeah, absolutely.
So they're soft. So in other words, they use a lot more liquid, a lot more water in their matzah than the.
It's just. I think it's just a little thicker. It's a little bit thicker, and so it ends
up being softer.
It's softer, and then that way the shiur, you don't need such a giant piece of matzah to make the shiur.
It's a width rather than length. It's the thickness rather than the width and length.
It's the total, the weight of the volume of the matzah, right? So, yeah.
Right.
My father, the Zechron Levracha, would tell me that in Samarkand, when he was there over Pesach, the Sephardim used to sit there eating matzahs. He described them as wagon wheels. Huge, thick matzahs.
It looks like a laffa. You know the laffa? It looks
sure.
Like that.
That's how he describes it.
It's also easier for when you take a bite of your korech and the whole sand, everything crumbles into whatever. This way, you make your korech and it stays together. So roll it up even.
Oh, interesting. Right. Ours cracks off and falls on your pants and on the floor.
Right.
Interesting.
Right.
You never thought about that.
And then your sandwich, your korech is in pieces at that point.
Interesting. I didn't think about how that's a big benefit. So so it's supposed to be a big inyan to bake matzah on Erev Pesach. So maybe that's what it. Yeah. Okay. Maybe that's what I guess that's why it's mentioned here. I was thinking more that in the olden days they did more that type of matzah that you sort of have to bake on the same day, otherwise it gets like that type of matzah. If you can't, doesn't last. Soft, but it doesn't last. Is that true? Like
because nowadays if you buy it, from the places where they make it, they send it frozen. And you leave it in the freezer until you take it out right before the Seder.
Oh, interesting. So the Sephardic people have their matzahs frozen because otherwise it won't last.
You deliver it. In other words, you order it from New York. Let's say you're in Boston or whatever, and you keep it frozen. And then right before the Seder, you take it out before the Seder, and you defrost it. But it's not gonna stay. Like the regular matzahs, they like you said, they can start from Simchat Torah and they don't go bad.
Do they still use the roller that makes the holes?
I've never seen it done, but you can still buy it, and in Eretz Israel, it's easier to buy it also. Find places easier to buy it.
They're using the hole puncher.
I know. I've never seen it done. I don't know how they do it.
Oh. What's that called, Rabbi?
The hole puncher?
Yeah.
The
perforator.
A redler.
In the Hebrew? I don't know. What the Hebrew word for it is? I have no idea.
Yiddish. Wasn't it like a redler or something?
I don't know. I once was involved in a matzah bakery, and it's like it's not so simple. What goes on over there, and
we in New York we used to bake the Rebbe's matzah or Pesach. The Bach.
What do you mean? You were there? You
Yeah, sure. The Bachram went to the bakery and made the
Yeah,
Rebbe's
but there
matzah
must have
Erev
been
Pesach.
there must have been 500 Bachram, and how did it work?
No,
You
there
must.
was like 25, 30 Bachram went from the yeshiva.
I'm saying you had to be like lucky to be chosen to be one of those people. I'm sure there
Yeah, I
must have
guess.
been 500 people want to come.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
yeah,
So
we
you were
went.
there. That's
Yeah,
incredible. So the
yeah.
Rebbe baking the matzah on Erev Pesach. You were standing right there, like right near the Rebbe.
No, the Rebbe wasn't there. We were baking matzah for the Rebbe's use and for
For the Rebbe's use.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah,
So the Rebbe never came actually
and
on
for the
Erev Pesach.
extended household. I never saw.
You never saw the Rebbe. Uh-huh.
This is like 1977, 78, 79.
Right. No, because they always say about the Rebbe's matzahs. I always assumed that maybe the Rebbe was there, but I guess not. Right. Okay, so the story here is that on Erev Pesach, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai would make like an announcement. It's time everyone should leave the Beis Medrash because they needed to go bake the matzahs, and they needed to go bring the Korban Pesach, or they needed to put their kids to sleep. So, for whatever reason, however you want to learn, different explanations. Also, on Erev Yom Kippur, everyone has to go home. It's a mitzvah to eat. You got to, it's a mitzvah deraisa. It seemed like seemingly it's a mitzvah to eat on Erev Yom Kippur. So the same thing. So therefore, he would make an announcement. People should go and eat. And this is what Rabbi Eliezer's Talmud would noyig afterwards. In other words, it seems like Rabbi Eliezer's Talmud, according to this paragraph, even though we didn't mention it before, but he also followed all of the other things as well, that he would be noyig all of these things, not just the ones mentioned in the previous. In other words, Rabbi Eliezer in the previous paragraph only mentioned some of them, but in truth, he used to follow all of these. I guess he only mentioned those matters that were showing that he heard every Shiloh that was in the Beis Medrash. I guess that's why he only mentioned those few things, even though he really followed more other things that his Rebbe used to do. Okay, then the Brisa tells, then there's a Brisa, the Gemara brings a Brisa that Hillel HaZaken had 80 students, and different levels, 3 levels. There was the Moshe Rabbeinu style ones, there was the Yoshua ben Nun style ones, level ones, and there was the middle, intermediates. And what it means that they were Moshe Rabbeinu style, it doesn't mean they were on his level of nevuah, of prophecy, but they were right. They were fitting that Shechina should come and they should have the Shechina, and except for because of the Oven Hadar, it's brought down. Maybe the Rashbam brings such a pshat that because they were fit, but they didn't have the Shechina. They were fit that the Shechina should come, except that because of the people of the generation, that was a problem. Okay. And so they weren't like Moshe Rabbeinu in prophecy, of course. And then there was the ones that were like Yoshua ben Nun, they were fit that they could hold that the sun would stop for them. That they, just like Yoshua ben Nun said, this Shemesh begivayin doim stop. He called the sun to stop, and it stopped. So they were fitting that they could do that. They could have stopped the sun if there was a reason for it. By Yeshua, there was a reason, and Yeshua stopped the sun, and then 20 of them were Beinanim, were in between. And then it mentions that the Gadol Sheva Kulon, the Gadol, the greatest one of them was Yonasan ben Uziel, was Yonasan ben Uziel was buried in Amuka, and right near Tzfas. And then the Koten Sheva Kulon, the smallest of all of them, is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. I mentioned yesterday that the little question, there's a question on this Gemara that you're going to say that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is the smallest of all of them. Why was he the one who took over Hillel? You know, he's the one who merited to take over Hillel, and yet he's considered the smallest amongst them.
Rabbi, in one place they do use they are translating Katan as youngest, so maybe then he was the one left to be able to take over because he was the youngest.
That's what
What do you
Rabbi
mean in one place?
Rabbi Steinsaltz says also the youngest.
In the translation, they're translating Katan as youngest, not the least grade. In other words, so maybe because of his age.
Who is that? Who's translating it that way?
This is in the Torah app I have. It says the youngest of them. If he was like this, imagine what the other ones were like. But in any case, they translated as youngest, not the least grade in the Torah.
That's what I was complaining about yesterday. It didn't make any sense.
Rabbi Steinsaltz
about how great all the others are. Then
Rabbi Steinsaltz says the same thing. It's the youngest.
The smallest.
Right. It's just surprising. Ezra has a good question on it. Why would it be mentioning about the youngest and the oldest when we're dealing with the greatness of them? It's a good question, Ezra.
I think it must mean the smallest in stature, not smallest in age.
Right. But but on the other hand, there is a question that why was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai the one who took over? But maybe it's not such a strong question. Maybe you could say that he had the leadership skills. The other ones were great, but they didn't necessarily have the orator skills, or leadership skills, or the certain so maybe that's why he was the one who merited to take over the Nesius. Maybe it's not such a strong question. But the Kesef Mishnah wants to say that it means in Shar Chachmas, in other wisdoms, not in Torah wisdom, but in the other type of wisdom, he was the smallest of them. But in Torah, maybe he was the greatest. But in other wisdom, in other words, if you look at all of it together, and then because he was there was one area where he was the smallest. And the problem is, it seems surprising that it would be talking about the secular knowledge. And that's what it's emphasizing, that he was the smallest in secular knowledge.
Also, if the youngest is as opposed to the greatest, the youngest means the least among them. I'm sorry, the Katan means the least among them. It's very insulting. It could be that it means the youngest, not the greatest, or the least great.
They're sorting out who's junior, and that's enough of a separation. That's all.
Right.
It would seem to be that it meant the youngest, not the because Rabbi Steinsaltz says the same thing. The youngest.
Yeah. Also, isn't it that every generation, with that we should Chalavai, we should be we could reach the level of the previous generation. So, right, in each generation, we lose a little.
Yeah, that's what it says. Like if they were like humans, we're like donkeys. If they
right,
they're like angels, we're like humans. Yeah.
Right, and I mean, almost you see it from the way the world is. For us, the world's a little easier now because you have all these conveniences and whatever, and they were able to do everything without all that. They kept everything, whatever, without all the easy things we have nowadays. Otherwise, they didn't even have a refrigerator. It's like, but still, they kept everything.
Right. Anyway, it seems like there is other pshatim. I don't see where where Rabbi Steinsaltz gets that from, unless he's just simply translating the simplest translation. But anyway, we see the Kesef Mishnah doesn't seem to want to learn that way. But Rashi doesn't seem to say anything on it, and so I guess it's up to however you want to translate it, however you think is the best translation. So they said about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai that he never that he didn't miss out on any of the Torah and anything, and even other knowledge. He never missed a pasuk, a mishnah, Gemara, like a discussion of comparing things of the the logic of the meanings of the Mishnah, the understanding. Halacha l'maisha misinais, Medrash Haggadah, Diktukei Torah, which are like teachings that are based on a grammar or letters of the Torah, extra, and the Diktukei Seifrim, like rabbinic decrees. He never missed out on any of those. Kal v'chomer, Gzeir Shavas, all different types of ways of learning things from other things. To Kufais, the way of the constellations and the way the sun and the moon, and the astronomy, and gematrios, which are different teachings of the Torah that teach us laws based on the gematria, the numerical value, and sichos Malachi Yasharei, sichos shedim, sichos dekolim, which Rashi says he doesn't know what they refer to, but the talk of the angels, the demons, and the dekolim, and the date palm, the palm branches, I should say, the palm leaves. So they bring down in commentaries, they bring down a few different interpretations about the talk of the palms. What does that refer to? Yesterday we said maybe it means the wind when the leaves move. So they bring similar things in the commentaries here. They have he knew a certain type of a abracadabra type of thing. He knew some type of a lilchaish. Lilchaish is a way to like an amulet type of thing. I don't know how to cause. He knew some type of a segula, I guess. I guess you would say more like a segula. He had a segula of that he would know how to fill the field with palm trees and to uproot the field of palm trees. It's Rabbeinu Gershom says such a thing in Baba Basra, that he knew how to say certain things that would cause the tree. I guess it would like bring blessing to the tree, to the field, or to uproot the field. The Rajba says that there was in his days, he brings from the High Goyim, that in his days there was someone who knew the way the palm trees, what they're saying when they move with the wind. So that's similar to what we were saying yesterday, maybe the way they move. But then the Ritva has a little different shot. He says that, and he says not with the wind, when there's no wind, when they move. That's what he was able to recognize what's going to happen based on the movement of the leaves of the tree when there's no wind. Because if it's the wind, then it's the wind causing it to move. But if it's no wind, so he would cover the tree so that no wind would cause the branches to move, and yet they would still move. He would know, he would have an understanding of I don't know if it's going to rain the next day or it's going to snow or something like that, and he could tell from the what they're saying, what the leaves are saying. So so it seems like there's different understandings about people speaking about the what people
Jerry says the Gaonim explain that traditionally there was a way to divine esoteric knowledge from the motion of the palm trees, which appeared to be speaking with each other.
Right.
Rabbeinu Meir Halevi.
Mm-hmm. Right. There's also a concept of which trees are healing trees for this type of sickness and for that sickness. So where to plant the trees. So there is such other types of pshatim as well. Like so he knew all of that stuff. Then it says he knew the mushals. They used to have all different types of parables of the koivsim and the shualim, the launderers and the foxes. Famous parables all about the smart fox, and so he knew all those parables and Davar Gadol. He didn't miss out on any of them. And a Davar Gadol, Davar Katan. What is the Davar Gadol? Big thing is Meiser Merkava. This is about the chariot of Ezekiel, and what the greatest prophets didn't even weren't able to the holy chariot of above, Merkav Elyono, that the prophets weren't able to see. But anyway, he knew it, he understood it, and Davar Katan is the discussions of Abaye and Rava, the dilemmas of Abaye and Rava, and that's called small. Why is it called small? And seemingly that's the whole Gemara is based on those things. That it's small relative to the Ma'aser Merkava, to the workings of the chariot of Hashem. And what did Rabbi Yochanan fulfill? The pasuk he fulfilled about Rabbi Yochanan, it was fulfilled the pasuk of Lahanchel Oyavai Yesh, that I'm gonna bequeath to those that I love 310 that Hashem, or those that love him, to bequeath Oyhavai, to his lovers. $310 worlds, and that's the word yesh. So that the fulfillment of that pasuk, that yesh is the numerical value of 310. Then I'm going to give him 310 worlds, which basically means he'll have great reward. And the reason is because he's filled, his storage houses are filled with wisdom and Torah and so on. Now, what does it mean that this is the smallest one of them was so great? How much more so can you imagine the greatest of them, how great he was? On Yonas and Ben Ozil, it says that when he would study Torah, any bird would be burned up when it would fly over him. Why would it burn up? So Rashi says the angels would gather around to hear Divrei Torah, and the birds would die from the fire of the angels of fire. But Taisus over here says that the reason is because he studied Torah at such a level that it was like when Hashem gave the Torah, and when Hashem gave the Torah, so there was a great fire and so on. So like Shas Matan Torah. So therefore, he studied Torah with such similar to it was like a reliving the experience at Sinai, and the fire was around, similar to when it was given. Yes, David.
It was 310. Is that the number of students that were by the Rebbe Rashab by Sudas Mashiach?
Oh, is that what it says? 310 students. It says something like 18 tables, and might be based on that pasuk, right? I don't know. Yeah, I don't remember the number, but I remember it says something like 18 tables, and it made a big Sudas Mashiach. Yeah. Okay, so we're up to the next Mishnah, and the next Mishnah is a Mishnah that we are somewhat familiar with. Mishnah on page 28a, and we are maybe 3/4 of the way down the page. It's 5, 10, 15, maybe 20 lines up. Misha haya Raishay Verubai Vesukah, 28a. 28a, about 20 lines up. Misha haya Raishay Verubai Vesukah, person who had his head and the majority of his body in the sukkah. And his table was inside his house. So he's got a sukkah that he's inside it. The majority of his body is inside it. But the problem is his table is inside the house. So Beishamai Paisam Mesabi says that it is invalid. He's not considered to be eating in the sukkah. We're afraid he's going to be leaning towards his table. He's going to end up eating outside the sukkah. And it's puzzle. Veisil Machshin says it's kosher. Now, if you remember that the Gemara earlier Gemara had spoken about this, and mentioned that there's a little problem with the Mishnah, because puzzle is, if you say something is kosher, something is puzzle, It's generally about, it would seemingly be if the sukkah is valid or not valid. And here we're basically saying that the person maybe didn't do the mitzvah of eating in the sukkah because the table isn't there. The table is in the house. But and the Gemara explained earlier that there's really two cases here. There's really a case of a small sukkah where the sukkah is invalid if it's too small. It can't handle the table. Then that would make sense to say puzzle. And then you have a case where there's a big sukkah, but still he put the table inside the house. So you're sitting at the edge of the sukkah and the table is inside the house. And then the problem is that you're not fulfilling the mitzvah of sukkah because you are probably going to end up leaning towards the table and therefore it will be invalid. According to Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel Beis Hillel says it's kosher. Amr lahem Beis Hillel Beis Shammai. So Beis Hillel told Beis Shammai, loikach hoya maisa. Isn't the story shaholchu ziknei Beis Shammai ziknei Beis Hillel levaker es Rabbi Yochanan ben Hachir? Didn't the rabbis go to visit the elders? Shammai Beis Hillel, they went to visit Rabbi Yochanan ben Achiranis or ben Achirani, and and they saw that his body, his head, majority of his body was in the sukkah, but his table was in the house. They didn't say anything. Amru lahem Beis Shammai told back to Beis Hillel, the students of they told back to the students of Hillel, Misham Raya, you're going to bring a proof from this type of story, from this story. Afheim Amru Loi, they did tell him. Im Kain Ayusanai, they told Rabbi Yochanan ben Achiranas that if this is how you've always accustomed yourself, like Yamta mitzvah sukkah miyamecha, you've never fulfilled the mitzvah of sukkah in your life. So there's a debate, seemingly about the story, how the story happened, like what happened in this story. Did they tell him off or did they not tell him off? If they didn't tell him off, then it would be it would imply like it's kosher, it's good according to everyone. And if they did tell him off, then obviously it's not okay. So the question is, what did they tell him off or not? And so this is the debate between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel says this is fine, it's okay. You have your table inside. We're not afraid. Person's not going to lean towards the table. It's a mitzvah of sukkah. They're going to be okay in their sukkah. The Beis Shammai, no, they're going to end up leaning. They might end up leaning. We have to make a decree. It can't be kosher. Now it's interesting, the term like kiyamta mitzvah sukkah miyamecha. It's a topic of discussion. What does it mean? You didn't fulfill the mitzvah of sukkah in your whole life. What do you mean? Just because we're afraid that they might end up leaning into the house, so they're not fulfilling the mitzvah of sukkah in their whole life. They fulfilled the mitzvah of sukkah. They didn't fulfill the rabbinic law of sukkah, but they fulfilled the biblical law of sukkah. So there's a whole discussion that seems that what he's saying is that you're not fulfilling the mitzvah of sukkah even biblically. Even biblically, you don't fulfill the mitzvah of sukkah. This is the way, I don't know if we mentioned it there, but there's an earlier Taisus that brings this out, that he says that when the rabbis made the decree about the sukkah, it has to be a certain size, and you have to, this is a part of the law of the rabbinic rule, is that if you don't do it right in this scenario, you actually are not fulfilling the mitzvah even on a biblical level. The question is, how do the rabbis have the right to do that? Normally, the rabbis make a decree. The rabbis can make a decree, but it doesn't mean that they invalidate your sukkah on a biblical level. They've invalidated on a rabbinic level, or they could say you didn't fulfill the mitzvah on a rabbinic level. But how do they have the ability to? They can make rabbinic decrees. They take away your mitzvah d'oraisa. They remove your biblical mitzvah. Like, how do they have the right to do something like that? So the commentaries talk about this, and the way the Ran doesn't agree with this whole thing. He says the way the Ran learns it is that like he and mitzvah sukkah miyamecha in a proper. You didn't fulfill the mitzvah of sukkah in the best way, in the lechatchila way. You haven't fulfilled it properly, but not that you haven't fulfilled it. You fulfilled it. You didn't fulfill it properly, at least according to the way the rabbis want you to fulfill it. But Taisus doesn't agree with that. Taisus says no, it means it literally. You haven't fulfilled the mitzvah. We have a similar thing on Pesach. Was Rabbi Gamliel at the Haggadah. Rabbi Gamliel says whoever doesn't say these three things did not fulfill right. Kol shalei yomer shleishit dvar malo Pesach matzah mar. Like what's the end? Pesach matzah maror. Whoever doesn't say these three things, right? Is that what it says? He hasn't fulfilled his obligation. So the question is, what do you mean? I ate matzah. How did I not fulfill my obligation? I didn't say Pesach matzah maror, but I ate it. I ate the matzah. Biblically, or you want to say rabbinically. So they're also. It seems like it's the understanding is that it's not so literal. That you on the highest level you haven't fulfilled the obligation, but you fulfilled the mitzvah of eating matzah. But anyway, so here there's a discussion if it means literally, and do the rabbis have the right to remove there was a pshat, there was such a thought that the rabbis have the right to, it's called hefker bezdin hefker, that the rabbis could make your sukkah not yours. And maybe the rabbis did that here. The sukkahs, that they removed the sukkah from being your sukkah. Because there is such a rule that the rabbis have the right to be mafkir, to take your ownership, remove your ownership from something. So because of that, you could say that maybe you don't own sukkah. But the problem with learning that way is that you don't have to own your sukkah to be yaitz of the mitzvah of sukkah. That's Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. You have to own your sukkah. So even if the rabbis have the right to take away your sukkah, they still can't take away your mitzvah, your biblical mitzvah, that you fulfill the mitzvah of sukkah. And so it doesn't really help to learn that way. So it must be that according to Taisus, that the rabbis do have the ability to explain the biblical mitzvah in a certain way, and to say that this is how we are obligating you to fulfill it. And if you don't fulfill it this way, you actually are going to lose out in the biblical mitzvah. In other words, not necessarily do all the Rishonim agree with that understanding, but Tosfos seems to follow such an understanding that they have the right, and there's yesh koyach b'chachamim laker davar min haTorah. They could remove something from the Torah b'sheiv al tasa. Here they have. So this is al derech. It's similar to that idea that they have the right to sort of like remove your mitzvah if you don't do it in the proper way. Yes, Victor.
So does this go with the fact that the way in other words, in his house, usually a person in their house, they sit at their table, right? So if you're going to be reaching to the table in your house, you don't reach towards the table; you sit at the table. So you're not.
You're saying you're asking why would anyone even ever lean over the table? That's not the normal thing to do. Even why are we concerned about this? What's the whole rabbinic decree here?
He wants to stay in the sukkah, but the food is on the table, so he keeps inching his way towards the table, and then he's going to end up. He's going to forget that he's supposed to be in the sukkah. He'll end up sitting at the table, because in your house you usually sit at your table. You don't sit at your table.
Well, the understanding I have is that he is actually sitting right near his table. He's sitting right near there. The table is outside. He's inside, but he's going to end up bending over. He's going to end up. So he's like on a borderline state, and he's going to end up not eating in his sukkah. Right. But you do inch, or as you say, he inches his way. He's going to pull in closer to the table and end up not eating in the sukkah. Right. So anyway, that's the decree here. Yeah. So that's why Beis Shammai is against it. Beis Hillel doesn't seem to be concerned about this. Beis Hillel is not worried, but Beis Shammai is concerned. All right. Anyway, so let's just finish off the Mishnah. Nashim va'avadim uktanim turim nasukah. Women, slaves, children are exempt. Katan shein tzarich li'imai chayev b'sukkah. A child that doesn't need his mother is obligated in sukkah, in chinuch, right? So he doesn't need his mother. If he's at that stage, then he has to eat in a sukkah. If he needs his mother, so then doesn't have to eat in the sukkah. But now we're going to see a story where Shammai is machmir. Story that the daughter-in-law of Shammai had a baby. So what did Shammai do? He took away like the roof, the tar from the roof, the stuff on that covered over the baby, and and he put schach on top of the bed and over there, and b'shvil katan, for the child, so that he could fulfill the mitzvah of sukkah. So we see, of course, the Gemara is going to ask. It doesn't seem to flow. First, we say that you're exempt, and then Shammai does this. And the conclusion of the Gemara is, Shammai was machmir, even though in other words, the story sounds like a contradiction. First, the Mishnah says you're exempt, and the child doesn't need the mother, then he's chayiv. But if he needs his mother, like a baby, is going to be exempt from a sukkah. So then the Mishnah gives a story where this baby was just born, is sitting in a sukkah. That sounds like a contradiction. The Gemara is going to answer that it's Shammai was machmir, that really the halacha is you don't need it. All right, we're going to stop here. Sei gesund, everyone. Have a very good day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.